For TRICHOMES.com, I'm Jesse Batend, and this is The High Ground. On this show, we feature leaders of the cannabis industry. We talk to everyone from farmers to CEOs and public officials, anyone making an impact on the cannabis community and beyond. We talk a lot on this show about how hard it is to get into the cannabis industry. There are the upfront costs, but then there's the permit process itself, which often has serious problems. Just for an example, take a look at our article last week on the alleged corruption in Illinois' recent permit lottery. Not to mention, there's issues with access to capital and working with banks. It makes sense that we do, though, because those licenses represent millions of dollars, and perhaps more importantly, a huge head start. But once you have that permit, that's only the first step in the process. Today, we're talking to Mariah Dodson, a veteran and co-founder of CBD retailer United Herbalism. Back in 2018, Mariah and her partner, Vanessa Macias, made history by becoming the youngest license holders in California. But because of a confluence of factors, 2 years later, they still haven't been able to start the company they dreamed of building. And speaking of dreams, this is actually Mariah's second attempt at achieving hers. In addition to the difficulties that I mentioned before, for Mariah, getting into cannabis came with an additional cost. In this case, her career in the military. Mariah, thank you so much for joining me.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So you, like a lot of the other people that I've spoken to, have lived this entire almost life's worth of experiences before beginning their current career in cannabis. So let's just start there. Who were you before you got into cannabis?
Yes, absolutely. And I always love reflecting on it because I'm able to really start to see that, it's a work in progress, but it also is a masterpiece in progress. At 19, I dropped out of school and joined the military and really started my fast track to leadership, but also to service, to just being of service. And so I was trying to figure out what is the fastest way and the strongest way that I can be able to position myself and my family to be able to do more in this world. And so officer school was like the first option. So when I enlisted, I was not doing too hot in college. I was living on my own, living on my own, partying probably more than I should have been. And they're just literally one morning I woke up and I was like, yeah, this isn't it. This is it. This is not it for me. I'm 18 years old. I need to do something. I need to do something now. So I took my test. I ended up passing. And because I ended up tearing my ACL in sports and stuff like that, I had to go through a whole process to even get into the military. But then after my 19th birthday, I got in, I got my ship out date, and it was on from there. I just really started living as the person I wanted to become.
I'm sure that your military service informs a lot about your career, but what are some of the specific ways that it's informed who you are today?
Okay, I love that. So one thing I always like to say is I come from a really good family. Like my dad's a college football coach, so I've always lived in like this super militant environment.
Interesting.
So
okay.
Yeah, and my mom, she has her doctorate degree in education. So if I was a minute late being home, I was out doing military drills or college football player drills.
Wow.
So being in the military really just kind of affirmed everything that my childhood had already taught me. But one of the new skills that I acquired while being in the military was logistics. And I ended up being able to become the youngest squad leader in my field artillery unit. Where we tracked, parts, pieces, people, you name it, and we had to track it. And because I really did a good job at that, at systemizing that process through the resources that they already had, I was able to excel and become a squad leader. So the logistics and the leadership is really where I got to hone in on those two skills while being in the military.
And so what's the timeline here in terms of you entering the military? What year are we talking about?
Okay, so 2013 is when I deployed to basic training. And I was in basic training for about 8 months. And then as soon as that 8 months was over, I was in. I was, I was working on those skills every single day. And I just got out of the military last year in November. So
Wow.
it was 5 years in which I was actually in the military. And I got out. Truthfully, I'm so grateful for that process, is because they were going to deploy me, and I didn't have anyone to help me take care of my son. So I ended up being able to get out. And one of my battles stepped in for me for deployment. So it's really, really honorable what they did, but really everything kind of just worked itself out. So I'm really grateful for that process.
What is it like to know that somebody had to step in for you?
I still am in contact with that person to this day. And it almost just like moved me, where it's just like every day it's just like, hey, this could have been what I could have been doing. And this could have been the risk that, I would have to take, but this person stepped in to do so. So I just really do my best, not only for myself, my family, but for my battles who are out there serving every day. It's just like, we need access to more. We need to know that, yes, the military is in a great environment, but also once we get out, we're unlimited. We can do this, we can do this, we can do all these wonderful things and set our families up for success for the long run. So it just, that whole experience pushes me to even go harder every single day because of the opportunity that I have.
And so during those years that you were in the military, did you ever hear anybody talk about their cannabis use at all?
Oh, yeah. I always get goosebumps when someone says that, just because, like when you're in the military, you really form a family bond with your brothers and your sisters. And to see that, to hear, first and foremost, to hear the stories is enough to make anyone burst into tears. To hear the stories of what these men and women had to endure, what they had to see, what they had to go through, and then come back to society and have to live through. They're pumped with opioids. They're pumped with it, and they're aware of that problem. And the addiction is so, it literally is life-changing for them to know, hey, this is what I'm suffering with. This is why, and this is what they gave me as a solution, but I don't want that solution. But I'm at a catch-20 because I also don't want to be in pain and I don't want to be suffering. I have strap metal in my body. I'm going through these tears, and it's, so you hear people talk about it, and then you hear a whisper of cannabis, a whisper of, hey, well, I did this and it worked for me. And then you hear other people who are just like, no, whoa, it's almost like a very scary thing. But that whisper is becoming a little louder now. And it's exciting to even see the awareness transition a little bit, just so they know that, hey, this solution isn't working, but there may be another one. There may. So we have a long ways to go, but they deserve it. Whatever could work for them that is less invasive to their bodies, they deserve it.
I can feel your passion in that answer. And I do want to ask you, I watched a panel that you were on, and there was a man named Sean Kiernan on the panel who's with an organization called Weed for Warriors. I don't know if you remember this.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, you do.
Yeah.
So there was this moment in particular where someone asked Sean a question, and his answer seemed to make a strong impression on you. And I just kind of wanted to ask you about that. And I think the best thing to do would just be to actually play a clip of Sean speaking.
Cannabis is a substitute we hear all the time for opiates, but the thing we don't talk about much is as important as a substitute for the psych meds. Because if you look at all the antidepressants, and what do you have? Suicidal inclination, suicidal thoughts, and I'm a suicide survivor and can speak firsthand. Lamictal drove me to have suicidal thoughts within 48 hours, and I've never seen anything like it. And so when you talk about what it does, it's a substitute for so many things that we use that are sanctioned by the VA and the government that are more dangerous to us. So really, it means life to us.
Wow.
I think you can hear, even right at the end there, that moment seemed to make some sort of an impression on you. And I guess I was just wondering, what was going through your head in that moment, and maybe what you think about that moment now.
Absolutely. So as a Sean, they're doing amazing things over there at Weed for Warriors, and I do stay in touch with both Sean and Eric, and I absolutely remember that moment very distinctly. It's incredible, just to be touched by everyone's story and to know that everyone's really doing everything they can to serve that mission, to serve so that other people don't have to go through those horrible experiences. And I think it's more so about us as the leaders of these, companies trying to figure out, how do we collaborate? How can we all help each other to serve this patient? And I actually had the opportunity of throwing a Veterans Cannabis Ball with Eric, founder of the Veterans Cannabis Coalition, and it was an incredible event. We had over 300 attendees. 90% of them were vets. We funded veteran women getting gowns, getting their makeup done, veteran men getting suits, and offered free cannabis for them. It was just so incredible, and I'm looking to make that a yearly thing, just to continue on what little I can do right now for them, but always keeping the big vision in mind of really being able to create change and access to cannabis.
Well, that's actually a fantastic transition to talk about your story, because today you are the co-founder of a cannabis company, but at the time that you were starting the company, you were still a member of the U.S. military. And considering the history there, it seems like a rather improbable transition. So where does that process begin, and how did you end up where you are today?
Yes. So I always love really this memory, because there's so much joy involved in being able to really piece together what is Dust to Diamonds. And we were actually reconstructing a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home in California City. And this home was going to be for a veteran. It was going to be for 2 veterans. They were going to live in there. It's a holistic wellness home. We were giving discounted prices for them to live there. And we had gone to the city to get a permit. And while we were there getting that permit, literally that day we walked in and they were talking about cannabis. And it was just like the most bizarre situation, because she looked at me and she was just like, "Did you hear them say cannabis?" And we walk into the council chambers. We're 2 young women. We definitely don't look like we belong there. And end up speaking with the man who was writing the ordinance. And from that moment on, we started working together.
Oh my God. So it really was just like an opportunity of chance.
Yeah, it was literally like jump or don't jump. And she looked at me and I wasn't sure if I was going to jump, but she pulled my hand and we jumped. And I'm so grateful to this day. I'm so grateful because, without her, I'm not sure if I would have made that decision, but she gave me no choice. So we jumped in and we helped the man who wrote the ordinance obtain 8 licenses, literally writing the business plans, doing the site plans, researching equipment, you name it. We were a part of that process, speaking with growers from Colorado and Oregon, and just really getting to know the process. Now, my business partner is very familiar with the plant. I myself, I definitely was a consumer, but I was not aware of the depth of cannabis. And for that whole process is really where I learned the art and the love and the passion for the plant. And after we finished that project, we ended up saying, all right, what's next? The city itself was going into round 2 of licensing. And in round 2, we were able to receive over 19 other licenses for other companies. And, we were sitting on some consulting fees and we're just like, well, now what? And we were sitting in a restaurant and it was all men. We were the only women. And the men looked at us at the table and they're just like, what are you guys here for? And, we're chipper, we're young, we're saying, well, we're going to get some licenses. And everyone at the table started cracking up. And I remember that memory so distinctly because I was so embarrassed by, saying that. I literally was. I was like, oh, maybe that wasn't the right thing to say. And then one guy turns to me and he giggles. He's just like, well, good luck with that. And I remember watching them go up to get their licenses, maybe like 3 months later, and thinking like, well, we just helped all these people get their licenses. What's stopping us? And from that moment on, that goal had then become, we are going to get cannabis licenses to cultivate and to manufacture. So it took it was a long road. It was a lot of obstacles, but we were able to obtain 9 cultivation and 2 manufacturing licenses in the city of California.
Wow. That really is an incredible story. And I'd like to kind of drill into that for a minute, if that's okay, because I think that, I guess I wonder if that moment where the guy kind of laughed at you, if that would have stopped someone else, because you're clearly someone who has faced a lot of adversity and became a successful businesswoman at a shockingly young age. But that is probably a scene that is playing out in one form or another over the last few years across the country, and will continue to, because despite social equity programs in states all over America, the outcomes don't always seem to result in fair or equitable representation when it comes to running cannabis businesses. So I guess I just wonder, it was kind of a funny story as you told it just now, but I think that it would have stopped some people. Do you ever think about that?
Absolutely. And I think about we as people who have been affected by the war on drugs, really strengthening that muscle to understand that this is not going to be given. We are literally going to have to be more innovative, more creative, and probably a little stronger as well to endure what we are going to have to endure to even have the right to cultivate. Because the license is a very hard process, but it's still just the first beginning steps.
And I think that right there is actually the key point, which is that social equity programs are far from perfect, but we also spend a little bit too much time talking about them, because what we're starting to see is that all throughout this process, it's the first of many speed bumps. And for some people, they're speed bumps. You slow down a little bit, you traverse them safely. But for other people, it literally flips the car. So I guess I just kind of want to ask you, in terms of even the starting line of the race, do you think it would be possible for you and your partner to have acquired licenses without having gotten 27 licenses for other people first?
No. And I'll say that because when we walked into the city, we were outsiders. They did not know who we were, and they did not trust our capabilities. So I'll be honest, we did attempt to submit a license, and we came in with a folder, just literally a folder, and we were quickly turned around and said, no, that's not what you need. And in that being turned around, we had to figure out, well, how do we figure out what we need? Well, we needed to get boots on the ground. We needed to know the ins and the outs of the whole process. What do the site plans look like? What is a runoff slope? What does an architect do versus a civil engineer? We needed to figure out every aspect of it in order to come back with our binder that is full of every single thing on that checklist and more to be able to obtain our own license. So I definitely think that we are going to have to work a little bit harder, not necessarily saying in the extent that I had to work. I hope no one has to go out and get 27 licenses for another company before they obtain their own, but we may have to go and do a little more research, and come with a little more backing behind us so that when we do come into a city, we're not having to jump through hoops on fire backwards. Maybe we could just jump through the hoop on fire.
And what would you say was the difference between the applications that you submitted yourself that were rejected and the applications that you submitted for other people that were accepted?
I would say the number one reason why is because we had to obtain all of that knowledge for other companies. And we had to prove that that knowledge was going to be useful and be able to actually be built out into operation system. And it was the how. a lot of people knew what they were doing, but they didn't know how. So my business partner and I had to get boots on the ground. We had to do the research. We had to do all of the findings to find out the how. And after we figured out the how for a lot of other companies, we ended up figuring out the how for us.
So you are somebody who's been rather successful at a pretty early age. And in acquiring your license, you actually accomplished something historical, which is that you are the youngest license holder in California. And somehow we've gotten this far in the podcast without talking specifically about your age. But at the time that you acquired those licenses, you were actually 23 years old.
Yes, I did. And I always love the fact that literally the day after I got my license, I was in the field for the military. So that was like my celebration. You know, we were in 100-degree weather. And I ended up being late. So they made me carry a 240, which is like an automatic weapon, and it's literally probably 80 pounds. And so I was like, I was just giggling the whole time I was out in the field. I'm just like, dang, this is such a treat. Thanks. like this is the celebration. But it also was just very, very humbling. So yeah, the day after I got my license, I ended up going to the field for the military, and I had to carry around, and I was sore for like the next 2 months.
You're like, this reminds me of my birthdays growing up.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're out in the field, and did you talk about what had happened with any of your squad mates?
Only my close battles. But I did get called into the office 3 months later. By my captain, and he asked me, Mariah, are you in the weed business? And I remember being so afraid. I was literally shaking. I probably still shake to this moment because I just remember looking at him and telling him, yes, sir, I believe in the benefits of medical cannabis, and I am. And saying it, you know, I wasn't as confident when I said it, but I did tell him, yes, sir, I'm in this for medical purposes. And the room was so silent because it wasn't just the captain in there. It was all of the leadership team. And then he just told me I could go. And I remember walking out thinking, oh, shit. I did not know really what was going to happen next. But they did, you know, I did have to have a what we call a counseling in the military, where they just sat me down and really talked me through, well, you're really not supposed to do this. They couldn't give me any reason as to why, other than, you can't consume, which I already knew that. But it just was a very sticky, kind of awkward, misplaced situation. And from that moment on, I was like a sore sight in the unit. And I only had my core group, and everyone else was literally looking at me like, what did you do? You know, I go from being this leader in this leadership role, this squad leader, to then having that snatched from me. They took away me being able to go to sergeant school. And it was just like, from that moment on, I was like, okay, I'm going to have to pivot out, you know?
Well, I have to kind of draw a comparison, and if I'm wrong, you stop me, but it seems to me that this is another room full of sort of traditional gatekeepers that are telling you can't do this, and you did suffer consequences. Are you saying that your sort of dream goal of being an officer in the military was snatched away from you because of your interest in pursuing this?
Yes, absolutely it was. It was really snatched in like a matter of hours. And what's interesting is my business partner she was picking me up that day from drill. So she literally was outside, and I told her, I was like, hey, can you just stand over here just to make sure I'm gonna be okay? No, not that I was like really afraid, but I was just like, everyone else is gone. You know, like I'm kind of afraid right now. I'm really nervous. I don't know what to expect when I go in here. And then I remember walking out and like looking at her, and she's just like, you're all right, soldier. And I was looking at her, and I was just like, you have just no idea. They just demoted me. I'm not going to be able to reach my goals in here anymore because of this, and I was in a sense feeling sorry for myself, but because I wasn't able to see the other side of it at that moment. But yeah, it was entirely snatched in a matter of minutes.
Were you angry?
I was crying. I'm not going to lie. I was crying, and because I didn't understand. I was like, wait, I did this and now I have this. And it's just like, what am I going to do? I didn't have any understanding of what to do next. Because I was looking at the whole staircase. I wasn't looking at the step in front of me. So I definitely had to take some quiet moments and figure out that I'm going to have to take this one step at a time. So.
And since you said you only told a few people, do you suspect that one of those people sort of went to the leadership about what you told them?
Yeah. I've already had that conversation with my battle who said that he told. And I just remember just looking at him and it's just like, dang man, why? Why did you have to go and tell that? And still feeling sorry for myself in that moment, but just understanding that, he's just like, I still to this day I don't understand why he told, but I respect that he did, because if he didn't, then like I said, they were going to deploy me, and it almost was just like it was just all happening all at once, and it was just like, all right, pick, and it was just like, okay, I can still be of service. That was my only light at the end of the tunnel, is that I can still be of service. It's just going to be a little different.
So it sounds like at this point, your path forward is fairly illuminated, like the emergency exit lights on an airplane or something. Get out of here now. But it is not at all the end of the story, because here today, Dust to Diamonds is not quite where you want it to be. And a lot of companies face adversity, but I'm wondering if you could just walk us through what your expectation was for building the company and how that played out for you in reality.
Absolutely. So after pitching to over 100 investors with the same pitch deck, making minor tweaks here and there, all of the investors, I can say I couldn't tell one face from another. They all looked the same. They had the same background, and they had the same thoughts of who I was as well. After hearing no that many times, I put my foot down with myself, and I said, I am not going to be able to go to anyone and say, hey, this is what I've done. Here's what I've accomplished. Do you believe in me? And hear what I wanted to hear. So at that moment of this realization, it literally takes me a while to realize things, but this is after 100 no's, over 100 no's. I was just like, you know what? I'm going to have to prove this to my own self. No one's going to give me money to do this. I'm going to have to figure out how I make this vision happen. And from there, we turned our headquarters of where we have our administration offices. We took everything out of the front area and built a CBD storefront, actually, and where we are able to retail, distribute CBD products, in which we manufacture in-house. And we've been able to launch multiple brands, and really it's been the godsend, because I've now really been able to connect with over 1,000 patients in my community and really get to know them, know what their needs are, know what their mindset is about cannabis, and really get a better understanding of what this transition is going to be for not just my community, but for communities all over the world. And in this process, though, I've really been able to prove to my own self that I have what it takes to be able to build successful systems in which generate revenue. And we are now profit positive with our CBD retail store and brand. We're growing. And from that, I understand that until banks are ready to loan money, or until an investor really does believe in the vision of Dust to Diamonds, I'm going to have to raise my own capital. And I may have to invest into this myself until that puzzle piece is there. And I'm okay with that now. At first, the first year I was just like, all right, this is going to happen in phase 1. This is phase 2. But now I'm understanding that because I am a triple minority, things aren't like that for me. So I'm going to have to figure out another way.
So basically what you're saying is that despite acquiring 11 licenses, because of lack of access to capital, you haven't actually been able to use those licenses. And in fact, you've had to go about building a second business just to fund the business which you are already licensed to start.
Absolutely. Yes. So while making the slight pivot to focus on CBD, I had to secure the licenses. So we have a lease on a land. We have a land agreement with the city. And I see a lot of other companies who do not look like me. That's the first thing I want to make sure that I am aware of that, and I want everyone else to be aware of. They do not look anything like me. They're men and they're predominantly white. They are absolutely able to go in either through family and friends or outside private capital, raise money, and build out these cannabis companies. Due to the fact that I do not have access to that capital or wealthy necessarily families and friends to give me that money, I have not been able to build out my vision of the cannabis cultivation and manufacturing. I do not believe that I'll be able to build out the all 11 at one time, but we do have a plan to phase in the project. So I have put it on standby as I focus on what I can do right now to help me generate the capital to be able to do so, with hopes and prayers that I can continue to build up my own portfolio, build up my own business experience, and someday be connected with a company who shares in the same values and believes in the mission and the vision to help us get to the next step of building out the project.
So you were actively looking for partners, and it sounds like you had some trouble finding them, but what about interest just in your license in general? I imagine that there were people who were interested in, at the very least, getting access to the licenses that you held, even if they didn't necessarily believe in your ability to profit with them. Did you have to face sort of like permit vultures or anything like that?
This is a great part too, just because I was asked this question a couple of weeks ago, and I literally was hit with almost PTSD because I have been in so many predatory situations like that where I've had to trust my own instincts, and I've almost gotten used to saying no as well. I've been offered to be bought out of my company many, many times. And and there's been some times where I'm like, oh my God, that would be so good. But then what am I serving? What is the mission that I'm executing? So I've definitely dealt with predatory practices from investors and other companies who like, yeah. That's a nice vision. That's a nice mission. Yeah, you want to help your people. Cool. All right. What are you selling out at? And at this point, I am in it for the long game. And it took me a long time to realize that, but I'm okay with that. I'm okay with not being an overnight success or having to actually grit and grind and work to what it is going to take to build out phase 1 of this project. And I just pray that, there's other people who continue to evolve in this industry who believe in that same thing as well. And maybe there's ways that we could figure out how to collaborate.
So we have seen a lot of established cannabis companies make promises to hire diversely. In some cases, they do have diverse leadership. But it sounds like what you're saying is that in this particular case, when it came to investors or partners, they didn't seem to want to be equal partners or necessarily trust that you had the vision to make this company successful.
Yes, that is what I do believe it is. And from generations and generations, that comes from the fact that we have not had the opportunity to do so. we have not had the opportunity to be granted the resources or access to capital to even prove that out, you know? And no one's willing to take a risk with someone who looks like me. But I do believe that the world is evolving and becoming more aware. So maybe that may be possible.
And last question for you. If you had an equal partner or access to the capital that you needed, what would that mean for you?
After years and years of building resources, building connections, I would be able to press play tomorrow.
Mariah Dodson is the co-founder of United Herbalism. She's also the youngest cannabis license holder in the state of California. And what would you call yourself in terms of Dust to Diamonds? Future CEO?
Yes, I would say the co-founder and the future CEO.
And the future CEO of Dust to Diamonds. Mariah, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me.
I'm so grateful. I'm just honored to, be able to tell my story. I just really hope that it can inspire other people.
You can find more cannabis industry reporting at TRICHOMES.com, as well as more great shows like this one. If you're a member of the cannabis community and you have a story you want to share with us, reach out. You can reach the show at highground at TRICHOMES.com. Please take a second to subscribe to the podcast and write a review. It really helps others find the show. You can also join the discussion with industry insiders and get your voice heard by joining the community at trichomes.com and following us on all social media. The show is produced by David Fortin. I'm Jesse Batend, and thank you for listening.